Alrighty, everyone, welcome back to Culz Interviews. Today, we're going to talk a topic that we've kind of briefly dabbled in on the channel, mainly because my yaya is a huge fan of this artist. And of course, you guys know we went and saw the Baz Luhrmann film, and that is Elvis. And Miguel here has actually written a brand new book called Occult Elvis. So we will be talking that. But Miguel, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on.
No, thanks for joining. I was really excited when Mark kind of talked this idea, and I was like, "Yeah, no, I love Elvis. It's a cult, so it'll be a lot of fun, and it's a little bit different angle, than I think a lot of different authors write about him. So it's always fun to learn some new stuff. So hopefully we can, enlighten the audience tonight. But give us a little bit background. Where did this all start for you? As far as like the Elvis topic.
Well, it just kind of grabbed me, I have to say. I mean, I've never been an Elvis fan. I still don't consider myself an Elvis fan. I was always a Beatles fan. And then, as John Lennon said, and I've said this before, his famous quote, life happens when you're busy making other plans. And out of almost the blue, this voice, this call came to me, named Elvis, saying, "Hey, there's a part of my life that has not been fully developed that people have missed. It's all there. And your job is to go and find this information and put it all together and add some other dimensions to it." So I took this task and went down that rabbit hole. And it took me maybe 3 months to write the book. I guess you could say it was channeled. I like to say I became quantum entangled with Elvis, tongue in cheek. And it just happened. I was called to do it. And I consider Elvis, it was almost like a friend who needed a favor, who needed a story that the world had missed, although the story is hidden in plain sight. Yeah, everything I got wasn't from the tabloids or YouTube conspiracy places or all that. Is all right there, and all the lauded and mainstream and editorial check biographies from Priscilla, Memphis Mafia, friends, family, spiritual teachers. It's all there spread out about Elvis's occult inclinations, supernatural abilities, UFO experiences, and so much more.
Yeah, and you kind of briefly mentioned, as far as like tabloids and stuff, if there's one person that is a lightning rod for tabloids and conspiracies, it's got to be Elvis. I mean, I remember as a kid going to the supermarket and you'd see those Elvis, like, oh, what is that? World
Oh,
News, I think it was called. And they'd have
yeah,
like
they
some
all
different
had it.
Elvis story. Yeah. And so, yeah, he's been a big one for people. And I guess it's something to do with, he died youngish, maybe not the 27 club or anything like that, but young enough where people felt like there was still a lot more to be given. And so you kind of latch on to that and hope for more. Um, but as far as like the paranormal stuff or paranormal or occult side, I mean, it seems like it kind of starts really early with the blue light. What's the importance with that with Elvis?
Well, as I write in the book, almost Elvis had no choice but to be Elvis from the very beginning. It's almost like everything was fated. And I provide different lenses to see Elvis's life and what he went through, from ufology, from Jung, from Rudolf Steiner, from all lenses. So, for example, yes, when he was born, according to his father, Vernon, uh, Gladys was having the child in their little house that had no indoor plumbing, no bathroom. It had an outhouse. I mean, they lived in, yeah, the South during the Great Depression. They couldn't even afford a doctor or a midwife. So Gladys is there with family members, giving birth to Elvis and his brother. And Vernon goes outside to have a cigarette, just to, chill out for a second. And all of a sudden, this blue light comes over the house. All sounds disappear, even the sound of coyotes and so forth. The wind stops, it gets very cold, and Vernon just freaks out, as he should, and runs back into the house. And then somehow he has his memory wiped until years later, when he and Elvis had a UFO experience over Memphis, over in Graceland, of all places. So that started it there, and I don't make any assumptions. I say, well, this because was this the mothership dropping off Elvis? Was this some sort of heralding light like you see with Jesus and Alexander the Great and great historic figures of what was going on? But the blue light would follow Elvis all his life, from his music to his movies to when he used magic, he would create a blue light. It was just blue was always everywhere, and of course, I relate how a blue light is also very common in ufology and abduction cases. Even Whitley Strieber talks about going to see the visitors and seeing a blue light. So that's the kind of thread I put throughout the book of Elvis's very magical life.
Right. I mean, blue suede shoes and everything, right?
Blue
Definitely if
Hawaii,
you,
all of those, yeah.
yeah, if you look for it, blue is there. It's definitely a connection that, intrigued me. One that I hadn't made, so I was glad that you introduced me to it. As far as like the UFO aspect, is this something growing up that you were interested in, or did you fall into it about the same time as the Elvis stuff?
No, no, I've always like Elvis. When he got into the occult, I've always been interested in all sort of paranormal activity. My concentration, because of my podcast and what I really enjoy, is Gnosticism and Hermeticism. But I like to study everything: conspiracy theory, ufology, whatever's out there. See how it's a weird, busy universe, and it's a lot of fun to study.
Right? It's part of being human, and that fun part is learning about our past and learn about stuff that we don't know about. I think that's some of the topics we like to cover is paleontology and the paranormal, and it's all stuff that is changing. You kind of have a fix on it, and then something new is learned, and it changes. And I do enjoy that. Looks like Sam has joined us. Um, so kind of going back to early days of Elvis, how did the environment that he grew up inspire his beliefs? But at the same time, how did older Elvis's beliefs contradict maybe early upbringing beliefs?
Well, yeah, I mean, he obviously had a spectrum, and he was born in the deep South. He was born he under the umbrella of the Assembly of God, a Pentecostal church. So you would assume he would be a all in all a good old Southern Christian, but he never was that truly, because Elvis was born with a lot of supernatural powers. I mean, we can start with, that night his twin brother Jesse died, came out 35 minutes before, and he didn't make it. So that was a huge impact on Elvis, on his psychology, is what you call a twinless survivor. But somehow, or what happens is, especially with people with gifts, Jesse became sort of a guide, a conscious, a vision that would guide Elvis all through his life. Really, the most important uh, event that he had, and really the reason why he did most things, because he wanted to know the secrets of life. He wanted to know why this had happened. He wanted to know why he survived and Jesse didn't. And he wanted to know how did I rise from poverty to be the most famous person in the world? He was always seeking, and Jesse was a big part of it. And again, he would have dreams and visions of Jesse, and I compare him to other twinless survivors like Philip K. Dick and Liberace, and they're all the same. They are seekers. Unfortunately, they tend to be they're prone to workaholism, self-destruction, addiction, and they have problems connecting to the world. So again, blue light Jesse. It seems Elvis was meant to be Elvis from the moment he came out of the womb, but he was not just a normal person. One thing people said is that he wasn't that talented. He couldn't read or write music. They thought he was a good looking teenager, but they said his voice and talent were just mediocre. Somehow he was able to defy all logic. But he, again, going back to the supernatural powers, his mother Gladys was born with this second sight. She could see things at night, shadow people. She had premonitions. Both her and Elvis could astral travel and so forth. So they had some extra sensory abilities, but they kept it pretty secret, because obviously in that part of the world you didn't want to talk too much. Healing too. Gladys had the power to heal. And as I write in the book later on, healing was something Elvis did almost as a full-time job, whether it was healing headaches, hangovers, or stuff like heart attacks and cancer. There are there are instances he did that. And again, as I show in the book, he was never alone. There are plenty of witnesses for all these events, these miracles, if you would. So Elvis always thought that he was different, and he was always an independent thinker. By the time he was a teenager, he already believed in reincarnation. He thought eternal damnation made no sense. He was trying different alternative spirituality books like Khalil Gibran's The Prophet and so forth. So it was always there within him, and he was always a seeker. He was always, again, trying to figure things out, trying to figure out the big questions of life, driven by Jesse, by his poverty, by how he became so popular at such a young age. But it was only in his late 20s when he met his spiritual teacher, Larry Geller, who was you might say, a sage in occultism. And he opened the doors to the whole world of the alternative spirituality, from theosophy, Manly P. Hall, Freemasonry, Buddhism, Taoism, Gnosticism. That's when Elvis really went to the races and expanded his ideas. And I think the other thing too is that when Elvis became popular, he was not just the most popular person in the world, he was also the most unpopular person. The status quo did not like them. They hated him with a passion, and that included a lot of Christian churches. Like his own pastor said he was running with the devil, and Billy Graham, the great preacher, said his music was just, sinful and all that. And he was burned because he felt that the churches had turned on him, and he got very angry, and he said these things are businesses. They're promoting some unloving God, and they're talking about hellfire and damnation, which makes no sense to me at all. So he began looking for a different type of Christ, more of the cosmic Christ, the Christ within. He began to think that Jesus was simply a self-realized person and so forth. So
Yeah, I mean, you kind of expect that uh, with humans is to evolve, but it definitely seems like Elvis was doing a little bit more of it. Especially grown with. I mean, it's a difficult time to grow up. That the time that he grew up, and like you said, he had a lot of like not just fans, but a lot of people that didn't like him, and be it the music, be it the way he danced, or be it maybe his beliefs. It definitely seemed like there was both positive and negative. And how do you think he channeled that into his music? Do you see, I mean, where are some good examples where people can easily pick up on maybe some of these spiritual beliefs or teachings or things that he learned in his music?
with Elvis, he never wrote any of his songs. He only wrote or performed two social songs, In the Ghetto and If I Can Dream. What he did is Elvis could feel the energy underneath a song and bring it out and make it his own. That's why he loved gospel music or blues, because he would say, look, these are from people who were once slaves, who are outcasts. These are people who are farmers trying to survive. And these are people that are seeking God in their own way. And he was able to understand the essence of these songs and somehow make them his own and emit them in a very powerful, engaging, and even shamanistic way. So I think that's the genius about Elvis. I mean, he did come from a time where, he was before Bob Dylan and Paul McCartney and the singers. There was a time where you had the songwriter, the drummer, the producer, and he stuck with that. But he always picked these songs he could make them his own. I mean, we can talk about his big first number one hit, which was Heartbreak Hotel. We assume, that's a song that John Lennon said, before there was Elvis, there was nothing. And Bob Dylan said, I felt like I was escaping prison. And Bruce Springsteen said, it felt like all young people were dreaming the same dream. But that song seems like to most people some sort of, pop song, but it's actually a song about an individual who is so heartbroken he's going to a hotel to unalive himself. He's going to end it. So it was that's how Elvis really made and understood music. He knew the essence and soul of America, of what made America, of the struggles of all Americans. And he was able to tap into it and express it out in his own unique and powerful voice.
Yeah, I mean, you hear Elvis's voice, you definitely know it's his. It's very recognizable. And another thing too, I think, is just the way it changed people as far as like society. It's a time where, teenagers are kind of getting a voice thanks to obviously like films like Rebel Without a Cause, Elvis. How else was he changing society that way?
Well, there wasn't even teenagers. Until Elvis came, the term didn't even exist. So all of the sudden, you had after the war this mighty, materialistic, and powerful American empire rise out of nowhere, Eisenhower's America. But you also had UFOs and nuclear weapons and satellites and communists ready to invade. It was a very different world. People still don't understand how everything changed and why, alien tech, Nazis, who knows? But suddenly, this powerful empire that the history had never seen came out of nowhere. But at the same time, this group of people, which are called the silent generation and were called teenagers, were like, this is not good. We don't like all these changes. We don't like the status quo. So we are going to be more expressive and curious. That's why I call Elvis the Lord of the Crossroads or the Shaman, because everything pivoted with Elvis. Suddenly, people, and again, you can say, was Elvis the force or he was leading like a Pied Piper? That's up to you. But suddenly, people were like, we're tired of the old music. We want new music. We're going to explore Black music and Hispanic music. People were saying we're tired of the old religions. We're going to explore the East and some occultism and see how that works. We're tired of the old gender identities where, women are going to be more liberated and be able to be more aggressive and objectify men. And Elvis, of course, was their point. And men can be more vulnerable. The days of, Gary Cooper are over. We want more sensitive and soft men, androgynous men, which, like you said, would include James Dean, Elvis, Marlon Brando, and those guys. But everything basically was picked, even something like comic books. Comic books used to be something akin to porn in those days. It was banned in a lot of states like Louisiana and California. And Elvis, again, this new generation, no, we want these superheroes to be part of our lives. So everything was turned upside down with Elvis, and it never changed. We had what we called the post-war American culture, and Elvis was at the forefront of this. And he wasn't afraid of this new technology. He wrote it. He said, we got satellites, I'll do satellites. We got TV, I'll do TV. We got jukeboxes. We got, movie theaters everywhere, all up here in the movies. So he rode the wave of what the new America would be.
When you kind of touched upon comics there, how did comics and specifically like Captain Marvel or Captain Marvel Jr., the characters that would become Shazam once DC got in, they went through the whole legal rights with Marvel. But how did they inspire Elvis, or how did he take that into just what he thought he could become?
Yeah, that was a huge inspiration. Yeah, you've seen the Baz Luhrmann movie right at the beginning. The movie doesn't talk about his spirituality, but he does get how important the comic books were. And obviously, Captain Marvel was very popular, or as we know him today, like you said, Shazam. But it was everything Elvis wanted. And he's probably the most occult superhero there is, because remember, you've got this guy, he sees a wizard, and the wizard puts all these god powers in him, Zeus and Hermes and Solomon and all that. He says a magical word and he's transformed. Same with Captain Marvel Jr., except this guy is he's a handicapped guy, and he says the word and he becomes a superhero. And Elvis saw this as great archetype of transformation, that even the common man with the right magic, with the right spells, could become something larger than life. And that drove Elvis most of his life. I mean, that's why his logo was the lightning bolt, TCB, taking care of business, based on Shazam and all that. And the theme of electricity in Captain Marvel was always with Elvis most of his life.
Yeah, they kind of showed in that film with him having like the cutout lightning bolt on his chest when he's running around as a kid. And,
And
you
if
know,
you
kind
look
of,
at his Vegas outfits, it's
yeah,
straight out of Captain Marvel. I mean, he's dressing up like Captain Marvel. People were like, "Whoa!"
right. Well, and, you know, the outfits are super iconic to Elvis, but there was a evolution with those as well, you know, and, you know, ahead of the times, behind the times at times, who knows? But he made them work, and it's, you know, kind of like a magician or the stage presence where you gotta reel the people in. You know, how does he compare to like a magician?
Well, as I argue in the book, I he is. I say he's the greatest magician of modernity, and I give different definitions of magic. You've got the stagecraft magic, which Elvis is still considered the premier solo artist. You've got the classic, more Crowley type of magic, changing your consciousness through will. That's Elvis right there. You've got the Goetia, or more traditional magic of, being able to manipulate matter and all that. And no matter where you put it, Elvis is still the best because, as I write in the book, he was able to manipulate weather. He could move objects with his mind. He had psychic powers. He could heal. He could astral travel in so many instances in front of girlfriends, friends, and all that. So, whatever way you do magic, he was the best. And as I argue in the book, rock music was never really meant to be a form of entertainment. It really was a form of spirituality, a sort of shamanistic sound vibration modality that tapped deep into the blues. The part where it's African animism and the trickster devil spirit, and gospel, not gospel so that much, but or the part of gospel which is called Pentecostalism, the experiential shamanistic uh, movement where you're possessed by the Holy Spirit. And scholars have said Pentecostalism looks a lot like the mystery or Gnostic religions of thousands of years ago. So it was this fusion, and Elvis really took that and made it its own. And he wasn't alone. When you look at cats like Jerry Lee Lewis and Johnny Cash and Little Richard, these guys were preachers more than they were entertainers. They believed the same thing. And when rock music first came out, music critics used to go to these shows and going, "This is a holy tent revival." Remember, rock music was really this form of music that was different. There wasn't the separation of the spectator and the musician. It was experiential. It was involved. You were supposed to be with the shaman and scream and touch and sing along. And it was definitely therapeutic, and we all feel that way. I mean, you've been to a concert, we've all been to concerts, and we've seen the Grateful Dead or Jim Morrison, and we realize this is more like a shamanistic ritual more than it is just a form of entertainment. And Elvis was the font of this spirituality. And as I joke, you know, he was a shaman, his religion was rock, his church was Vegas, and his temple was Graceland.
Well, and for people that maybe don't know, what is rock and roll? Where does that stem from? Like the term?
Yeah, when in the 40s and 30s, whenever you'd have a Pentecostal service, and you would be possessed by the Holy Spirit and you start babbling in tongues and moving around on the aisles. It was called rock and rolling. And many of the other Southern Christians hated Pentecostalism. Why? Because they used to say it's mixing sex and Jesus. Because once these people got off, it was like bodies touching each other on top of each other, screaming for the Holy Spirit. So yeah, again, it's rock music was definitely a form of spirituality. And when you think about it, it's kind of logical. Again, we listen to music for therapy, for self-knowledge, for healing. We want to connect with these people, and because they see our pain, they see something within ourselves, and we want to be with them in some sort of a ritual.
For me, I always like listening to different types of music depending when I write, just what I'm writing. You know, if I'm writing a Western, I'm listening to Western music or, you know, something of that sort. And you're talking about like the rocking and rolling, and you can see that in just the way Elvis, danced and stuff. And he gets that from some of the blues stuff as well, and the blues artists he's around. Sam, before I completely take over interviews again, you got some questions? I know you cover a topic that you might be interested in talking about.
No, I mean, from what I've saw, like I liked a lot of the kind of like the UFO side of it and how he was like born into it. I didn't really know that about Elvis, so it was kind of wild to like hear and see.
Yeah, he was big into the whole thing. He was ahead of the curve too. I mean, we're talking, this is the 60s, right? People
Hmm.
still thought ufology was like combustion engine and little green men. That's about as advanced. And he was doing stuff like reading von Daniken's Chariot of the Gods and saying, hey, maybe the panspermia idea makes sense. He was reading the book of Enoch and Urantia and going, maybe these Nephilim and Watchers are aliens. He was reading the Old Testament and going, maybe Ezekiel, the wheels must be some alien spacecraft. He was speculating on maybe the extraterrestrials use telepathy to control the world, and they're stopping us from destroying ourselves. And there are colonies in Jupiter and all that. So he was very ahead of the curve. He'd be more at home today than he was in the 60s. But he never like also too, he never like just took a stand. He was speculating without really waiting for more information. Because and there were times where after he learned about the blue light and he had 3 UFO experience, he started wondering, maybe I'm some sort of star seed. He said that's a possibility, and I've got to be careful.
It's very true because a lot of that stuff is very fascinating, and I've had my own experiences with crafts that was kind of unique, not like to that extent, but like have seen them and I don't know, had what's the uh kind of a realization afterwards or like an experience that like I felt of something kind of opening up more than yeah, like my mind opening up more than it was previously.
Well, and what about like his UFO encounter at Graceland?
That one was a more traditional flying saucer one. And again, it went up. He was there with with Vernon, I think his spiritual teacher Larry Geller, and that's when Vernon talked about the blue light, and Elvis is like, "Oh my God, maybe I am an alien." But let's put a pin in it and see what happens. And then he had one in the desert while he was driving from Memphis to L.A. because he used to be he. There was a time he was afraid of flying, so he'd drive his motorhomes through the country. Sometimes he was there driving them himself. He was always a very hands-on multimillionaire, if you know what I mean, very down to earth. Um, and he and his entourage, members of the Memphis Mafia, spiritually saw these lights making all these insane formations. That's kind of the one experience I had, and they just did it for a while. And somebody was like, could this be American experimental craft? And Elvis was like, no, I was in the military a few years ago. There ain't nothing that can do this. And then then of course, as always, they got into a big discussion about UFOs and all that. And then the third one was in his house in LA, where he was there outside with, I think it's Sonny West's bodyguard. And this light came over, this bright white light came over the trees and the sky. And at first they're like, it's a helicopter, a plane. And then they're like, oh my God, it's not making a sound and it's right over us. This is not an airplane or a helicopter. And it just flooded everything. And yeah, it was a pretty wild experience. So those are the three you could say real UFO experiences that Elvis had.
Yeah, which is interesting because it's usually not brought up in different docs or books and stuff as much, and I appreciate your book because it definitely dives into showcasing that stuff more too. And like you said, it's not like it's not out there, but walk us through some of your research and what it took for you to put it together.
Well, again, it felt like it was channeled because I had already read about some of this stuff about Elvis from other books and I'd done my research, but this was during a time, this is like 10 years ago, I was, you know how we do research, we go through the different categories and we move on. I was in this what rock artists and movie stars, what were they into, what weird stuff they was into. So, you know, I was studying about the Beatles and Hinduism, David Bowie, Kabbalah, you know, Jimmy Page, Thelema, all these different things, you know, even Ronald Reagan and Manly P. Hall and astrology. So Elvis was part of my studies, but I sort of just packed it away. I probably made the same mistake people did when they were with Elvis and journalists and all that. They, you know, we all do that. Oh, these rock stars are just eccentric. They're into some weird shit, but it helps their art. But so what? That's what they do. And that's what I think we all did, especially my generation. And we just sort of filed it away without really taking a good look at how deep they were into these arts and how much these arts affected them. I mean, without Hinduism, you probably wouldn't have Revolver or Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. You know what I mean? Without Kabbalah and Thelema, David Bowie would have never done Ziggy Stardust or some of his other albums, or you know, or without shamanism and Colin Wilson, the Doors would have never, Jim Morrison would have never written the songs he wrote. So we make the mistake, and now, you know, it was one of those where, like Vernon getting his memory wiped, I said, "Oh my God, yeah, Elvis really was into this stuff. I wonder how much it is." And then I just simply started going to these different biographies, and you look at the index, Priscilla, Jerry Schilling, you know, the best man at his wedding, and you just go back and there's occultism, UFO, you know what I mean? You start, so they're right there for everybody to see, but they're all spread out, and somehow people forgot, and it's not, and it's still that way. I mean, Elvis fans still don't want to accept it. When I went to Graceland, I remember starting the tour. Our tour guide was like, "I just want to tell y'all that Elvis was a very spiritual person." I'm like, why is she warning us about that? She was buffering it because when you go to Graceland, you do see all the Hindu and Buddhist decorations and everything else, and he has books out there, and there's books about, you know, astrology and theosophy. I mean, they're all right there, and you see his handwriting. He's writing notes, like, you know, so it's all that there, but it's almost like they tell you that so you'll have a buffer and not take it too seriously. But it's out in the open, even if you go to Graceland.
Yeah, which is definitely a location I definitely want to check out. I was actually just in Tennessee, but on the opposite side of the state in Pigeon
Right.
Forge, Knoxville type of area, up till yesterday. But yeah, what is like as far as like Graceland today? Like how is that? You know, the feeling there. You know, as far as the people and what they think of Elvis.
No, it's incredible. The energy there, if you're a sensitive person, you're gonna feel it. You're gonna feel it, especially when you go to his grave. And it is like a holy sight because I mean, you see people at the graveyard and women are crying and people are praying. It's, I mean, there's an awe about it. I remember standing outside and this Australian woman is like, "I came all the way here and now I can't believe I'm going to walk into Graceland." And all of us were like, you know, pointing at her, "You walk in first because this is really a big deal to you." And she walks in, and you see, you know, you see Japanese, Africans, Germans, French there. All it's the second most visited house in the United States after the White House. Except, you know, one's demonic and when I say one's heavenly, in my view.
I think we know which ones is which.
Yeah, you know where I stand on this one.
Yeah, yeah, no, but kind of going back to like his impact worldwide, it's really fascinating because he didn't have world tours. You know, it's just his music was able to connect with people. Of course, later on we kind of learned why he maybe didn't have world tours with the Colonel and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on how the Colonel influenced him or maybe pushed him in different directions?
Well, that's another debate. And again, like I say, Elvis has reached these mythological levels that only people like King Arthur or John F. Kennedy could reach. It's so, I mean, he's still around. He's making apparitions. Like I like to joke, if you're making as many appearances as Bigfoot, Jesus, the Virgin Mary, and UFOs, you are in the pantheon. you are in the highest echelons of conspiracy theory and occultism. You're it. And Elvis is still there. He's really the only rock star that still, people really think is either alive or he's just appearing as some sort of specter. So, God, what was the question? I got sidetracked. I was getting all excited about Elvis and Bigfoot.
I mean, who doesn't? That's kind of that
Yeah,
old
yeah, yeah.
that old joke. Elvis hanging out on the beach with Bigfoot and Kennedy. They're still alive somewhere.
Well, it is. I mean, I know there's memes like Elvis and Bigfoot and Elvis Hanger. You see those all the time. But you wonder, I mean, he's connected to cryptids. He's connected to ufology. Like you said, you saw the tabloids. Elvis was beamed down, and he might have been. He's connected with conspiracy theories, connected with spirituality, with the mob, I mean, he's just a multi-dimensional figure, almost a literary figure by now. And he really is part of the American soul and the American imagination. I don't think he survived. And as I write in the book, I think he predicted his death and he knew he was going to die, but he was never worried about death. He believed in higher forms of vibrations and reincarnation. But I do think he's with us in some sort of egregore or psychic way, because he really represents the heart and soul of America. He really, and as I tell people, if we're fragmenting as a country, the empire is falling. We are at a crossroads like this country was at the end of World War II. So if you want to know where to go or what our identity is, Elvis. Let Elvis lead the way. He will take us to our next incarnation.
Right. I mean, Americana in its fullest, right there. I would say.
Yeah. For best or worse, Elvis really represents what it is to be an American. The good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful. He really encompasses it.
Yeah, and I'm definitely on your side as far as like I think he died. But speaking of that little conspiracy, have you ever read the Orion or Orion book that
Yeah.
kind of inspired that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. The music's great too. So, yeah, there's a lot of connection. People have been writing me about connections with Elvis and Orion, even beyond that, because I think Orion is sometimes connected with Osiris, Osiris the king who was betrayed. There's a lot of fun, like conspiracy, mythical stuff that you can have. But yeah, I'm starting to see it a lot more, and I'm starting to learn a lot more, not just from what listeners are sending or people who read the book, but I'm also discovering stuff like the guy I had a guest on my podcast, P.D. Newman. He lives in Tupelo and he's a big time alternative archaeologist. And he told me, 5 minutes away from where Elvis lived, there's a Native American mound. They've discovered it. And I'm like, well, was it, if Elvis was playing there, did he get some of those powers? You never know, right? So and of course, there's a possibility he had native blood. He might have had Cherokee ancestors.
Yeah, no, it's always interesting looking into that stuff. Have you been to like his birthplace home?
No, that's my next trip. I hope to do it this year. Is yeah, because when I went to Graceland, I had two roads to take. I could go to his place because it's 45 minutes from Graceland, Tupelo, Mississippi, or I could go to East Mississippi and go to where Robert Johnson was. And I felt I was with this theme about the Lord of the Crossroads, and that made sense because Robert Johnson was also a Lord of the Crossroads. In fact, he and Elvis died on the same day. And there are parallels. Robert Johnson is, the father of modern blues, just like Elvis is the father of modern rock music. And there's definitely similarities. So
Yeah, and you went to the actual crossroads, right?
in Clarksdale, Mississippi, yeah.
And
It's kind of
I've
hidden because it's still the Bible Belt. It's not like
yeah.
something people there are proud to talk about.
Yeah, no, that was my next question was like, how is it there? Because I've been in the South and that place, and I know how it is religiously, and so I'm sure that's not too postered everywhere,
No, you have to look for it. You really have to look for it to find.
right? Hey, that's the fun of research is going and digging. Have you? Because this is something we do a lot with like Billy the Kid and stuff, but have you gotten to the point where you start seeing Elvis, like, he'll just pop up in random places, like books, or you'll be walking around, like, an antique shop, and we saw, like, one of those mirrors with an etched drawing in it of Billy, like, have you started to have those experiences as well?
I would say so, yeah. But I think I've always had them. I mean, he is so ubiquitous. I mean, you're gonna find him. I was walking the other day in a restaurant and they had an Elvis special on their sign. Things like that probably are always happening, but I think it's more and more. People are telling me of their synchronicities and their dreams, and they're running into it. I mean, a synchronicity, as you said, it's almost like it's interactive. We have to be looking for them. At least our subconscious has to be it, and suddenly they start appearing all over the place.
Right, it's kinda like the old adage, if a tree falls and no one's there to listen,
Yeah.
it doesn't make a sound. Those things are always there. I actually, when I was in Knoxville, I just had a shake. It was the Elvis shake, so I'm sure you can imagine what type of thing. I asked the waitress, I was like, "Do people actually enjoy this?" And she said, "Yes." I was like, "Alright, I gotta try it." Get ready. Wasn't too bad. But, speaking of another musician that maybe got some inspiration from Elvis, and one I enjoy listening to is David Bowie. What are some of the connections there and maybe inspirations from Elvis to Bowie?
Well, that's the book I'm writing now, and I call it Elvis 2.0 because, and again, this was like the first book. There was a voice saying, I need your help, do this book. And then when I was done, I was like, I don't want to ever write a damn biography all my life. It's not like something I ever thought about ever, ever. And I said, I'm done. And it was a big sacrifice. It was draining, really draining. And Elvis is very demanding. I'd wake up in the morning and I'm like, I'm so tired. I've been up just one writing, and this voice like, get out your bed, man. We got work to do. But then this other voice said, you forgot about Elvis 2.0. I was like, nobody's like Elvis 2.0. And suddenly the voice said Bowie, and I was like, it's not Bowie. Like, they're two different characters, and I realized they're the same person, same template. I mean, I could probably list about 40 similarities. I mean, they were born on the same day, right there. They had UFO experiences, supernatural powers, grew up in poverty, abusive mothers. So many things happened. And Bowie knew. I mean, Bowie always said that he was watching his cousin as a kid. She was dancing to Hound Dog on the radio. And he said he had his first spiritual awakening. He said, this is it. Because he saw the joy and the power and the passion of his cousin. And he said, wow, look at her. She's free. And he said, I am going to be a star like this singer and he just became uh, yeah, he really mimicked his career on Elvis. I mean, even the jumpsuits, he admits he and his designer, they were copying Elvis. A lot of the things that he would do, like Bowie stopped taking airplanes one time, and people were like, "Oh, you're just copying Elvis." He's like, so much of what he was doing was. There was even a time with Ziggy Stardust when Bowie would finish his concert, he'd have his manager go, "Bowie has left the building," and I mean, so much. And they're both shamans. They both loved Captain Marvel. They both loved this transformational occult vibe, and they both really wrote it. I mean, Bowie took it more to the astronaut levels, although when you look at Elvis's Vegas outfits, it's all space age shamanism. It's just fusion. And Elvis used to start his concerts with the theme of 2001: A Space Odyssey, because that was one of his favorite movies, and Doctor Strangelove. He loved Kubrick. So you start seeing these very, very interesting parallels and how Elvis helped guide the American soul after the war, but Bowie was also important in helping guiding the UK out of its war, because it went south and it went through a lot of changes, and Bowie was there to help heal Western Europe and the effects of communism and all that. So a lot of similarities with those two, and they knew each other and they respected. I mean, Elvis knew Bowie. And probably my favorite story is that right before 77, Elvis contacts Bowie. He'd written him a note for touring, like "Good luck with your tour" and all that. And Bowie had seen Elvis in concert, but Elvis called Bowie and said, "Hey, do you want to produce my next album?" And Bowie was like, "Oh, I'll do it." And Bowie was a genius, whether it was Iggy Pop or Lou Reed, Mott the Hoople. He knew exactly how to bring the best out of any artist he produced. And unfortunately, Elvis passed, or he left the building, the material building. And so I always like to think maybe there's some parallel universe where there's this very cool album of Elvis produced by David Bowie.
Yeah, wouldn't that have been something? Yeah, no, Bowie, just his whole presence. He definitely has maybe a little bit of that Elvis presence, where even in his acting, he just bring. It's a little bit different than the Elvis acting, I guess I should say. Different movie styles. I mean, one's working Christopher Nolan, one's doing like cheesy B movies, but teach their own. What about like Black Star? What was the meaning for Bowie's final album?
Well, there you go. That one is so complicated. I'm still writing it. Obviously, Black Star, what does it mean? Many theories. Is it Saturn? Is it something Arabic? But I think the most logical one is Elvis sung a song, Black Star, and the song goes, "Every man has a black star. When you see your black star, your time has come." When Bowie knew that his cancer was probably going to, take him out, he decided to do this ceremonial death art called Black Star, and he named it after. It made sense he would name it after something Elvis did, because again, Bowie's awakening was Elvis, and it seemed he needed to give Elvis a nod. And I go into much more. I mean, it has a lot of very powerful Gnostic Saturn elements in the video, also in Lazarus and so forth. But I'm still working on a lot of details, and you can see the Gnostic myth and all that. But yeah, again, there's about 40 parallels, and I think symbolically, Elvis and Bowie are the same. And I hope when I'm done with this book, I won't get somebody saying, "Oh, you got to write Elvis 3.0." And like, who is it now? Prince? Michael Jackson? Prince seems to be like the best suspect, right?
Yeah, no, that's another one. Super talented, but definitely have that flair. Um, no, I was also thinking like, what about going back to the Beatles? They had a lot of influence, at least some of them, from Aleister Crowley. Even makes it on the cover in a pretty prominent spot there.
Yeah, I mean, Crowley was sort of he was kind of a counterculture hero, because Crowley was against the status quo. He was against the old ways. He was against, he was about creating your own magic, and he was an artist and all that. So he became very popular in the 60s. So yeah, from the Beatles to David Bowie to Led Zeppelin to the Rolling Stones and all that. So he was certainly, and he became, and then he was more of a symbol in the 60s, but in the 70s, that's when artists like Jimmy Page and David Bowie and others were actually doing ritualistic magic, and it got really dark. Probably all the cocaine didn't help either, but
Yeah, I mean that could definitely be a
yeah.
pretty big influence right there. No, so tell us a little bit about the just feedback you've gotten about this book from people that have read it, and has anyone reached out to you after they've read it, maybe that had connections to Elvis that, said they brought a new light to it?
Yeah, a lot of people have. They've been very moved, because I do try. I don't have any biases towards Elvis, but I try to show him as he truly was, which was a sensitive seeker, somebody who his quest for God and the divine was just as important as being an entertainer. Yet somebody who was also very tormented, very traumatized, very broken, like many of our stars are. It goes with the territory, and who was really trying to do his best and really moved a lot of people even in spiritual ways. So that's why I want people to see about addiction and other issues, that they can look at themselves. I mean, I don't know. Again, I don't know if Elvis ever had a chance to change his fate. I go into all details of why he couldn't escape his fate, because he was fated from the beginning. Maybe we all are, but maybe the best we can do is create some sort of destiny where we help others or leave some sort of message to to heal the world. So people have been reacting very positively. They're very touched by the Elvis that they're finding, and the depth of his talents, of his intelligence, and of his spirit. So the book is definitely hitting people the way I hope it would. I think Elvis fans are a bit confused because they're just not going to accept. It's hard for them to accept that he was something other than a good old Southern Christian boy.
Yeah, a little bit different than the prim and proper polished version they usually show on film. Is there a film version of Elvis that you like the most?
Oh God, they're so bad. Let's see. Yeah, yeah. There, some of them are pay. I love watching them as movies, but yeah, I think if you watch something like Kid Creole or Flaming Star, some of those you see that he really did had really good talent and screen presence. I mean, even Quentin Tarantino said he was a talented actor. He just was getting shit roles. So it's a pity he never got the roles that he should have. For example, True Grit by John Wayne. John Wayne wanted Elvis to be his sidekick, but he never got it. It was just Elvis was too expensive. He was like the Adam Sandler of his time. He would put out a lot of movies, but these movies all made a profit. No star can say that, right? I mean, every star has a bomb, whether it's Tom Cruise or Denzel Washington. Elvis, all of his movies made money, were profitable, and he was getting paid millions of dollars for these movies and 25% of the box office. I mean, it's almost like you'd be crazy not to make these movies. You know what I mean? Because
Hmm.
they were very popular. That's it, and that's what Colonel Parker kept telling him. Is like, you want to do the Steve McQueen, Paul Newman, Marlon Brando movies, but people are out the door watching your movies. You got to keep the customer satisfied. That's the Elvis they wanted to see. So unfortunately, he never got it. There's stories that he almost got to play the lead in A Star Is Born instead of Chris Christopherson. There's stories that he was going to play his hero Rudolph Valentino in a pick, but they either never came around, or he just he left too young. He was only 42.
Well, and he had made a ton of money. I mean, in today's money, it's astronomical. But to
Oh, it's
him, I
it's
mean,
like Silicon Valley money. I mean, even Taylor Swift couldn't even, or Jay-Z. I mean, I think from 65 to 77, he made about $4 billion. Now, count inflation, probably made
mm,
about $50 billion, and he blew a lot of it. But yeah, he was making money that even the biggest artists today couldn't even imagine.
right.
No
Yeah, no,
sponsorship, no corporate money. It was just him, movies, live shows, records.
yeah, just him. And I mean, heck, Vegas today is still pretty much sold off of him. You go to Vegas, there's so much just different things you can still go see for Elvis related stuff. It's really intriguing because I don't know of another person that really has this pull even today, like you said.
No, there's just not there. Again,
Right.
he really is a shaman of our country. He
Hmm.
is, and I mean, in shamanism, there's not only magic and therapy and all that, but we forget shamans, theatrics and music is essential in shamanism. Shamans look like Elton John in these tribes more than anything, and they have to entertain the tribe before they can put their magic into them.
Right. Yeah, no, I like you made the connection with just how like a shaman looks like versus kind of maybe what we picture him thanks to Hollywood. And it does look more like, older years Elvis versus like what you see on the TV and stuff. So I think that's a really, really good connection. Sam, any final thoughts?
I mean, final thoughts. I definitely agree that he has made an impact because even when I used to listen to his songs, like they always like hit different than like other artists. And like I didn't really listen to him too much, and it was kind of wild. like what he is capable of, and what he did in his time was pretty insane.
I mean,
Yeah.
even if it was in today's day, it'd be insane, I think.
Oh no, it would probably be even crazier with how much social media like expands to everybody. Like it would hit not even just the United States. It would be like a majority of the world as well.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Miguel. With social media, I know a lot of people say it's been the death of the movie star, but how would it have affected Elvis, do you
No,
think?
he would have loved it. He would have loved it because he would have found these topics because he never hid his beliefs or love for UFOs or all that stuff, but he didn't promote it. But he was always a very insulated individual. And he didn't do a lot of press conferences. He wasn't on Johnny Carson. He was a very isolated person. And he was rarely alone. I think in the bathroom was the only time he was alone. And even then, if he was meditating with people or his spirit, he had to do it in the bathroom at Graceland or at his Bel Air home. So he would have loved to have been out there arguing with Alex Jones and others and Jordan Peters or whatever about UFOs and magic and all that, because that would have been the only time Elvis could have actually really interacted with the world. Yeah, he loved, you know, being with fans and doing autographs and all that, but it always got so crazy they would almost kill him if he was out in public with fans. So social media would have been really a great therapy for Elvis.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he'd go to like the Roswell UFO Festival, play some tunes there. I'm surprised, they don't talk about him or Bowie more. A lot of that's like Queen and Led Zeppelin there, but they would
Yeah,
fit in.
Bowie had UFO experiences. That's another parallel. John Lennon, uh, Chris Squire of Yes. So there's plenty of rock stars who had. But again, somehow we suppress it. I think we don't want to. There's a part of this country that doesn't want to really face the power of alternative spirituality. And so we kind of brush it away.
Yeah, like you said earlier, we're too quick to just say, it's just part of the character they're playing, right? It's
They're
just,
just eccentric. Yeah.
yeah,
Make my
yeah,
records. Just make my records. And I'll be
yeah,
happy.
just like your music, keep doing that. I don't care what else you're doing.
Mhm.
What about like, so I know later in life too, he kind of got into like, collecting badges and stuff like that, and met with Nixon. They made that film with Michael Shannon playing Elvis, but also like he had a lot of interesting stories where maybe he got on a plane with some weaponry he probably shouldn't have been on with.
Yeah, I mean, Elvis always defied logic in everything he did, and I give example after example. Even how he got famous makes absolutely no sense. And of course, I've researched it. What was this? Some sort of cabal or CIA? And like, no, no, he was way before the CIA, and those guys were like, manufacturing celebrities. It's just weird. And yeah, there's what's the story? When he went to see Nixon, and he's the only artist who could actually show up at the White House unannounced and just show up and say, "I want to talk to the president." And the next day, he's talking. Nobody could do that with Trump or Biden. You know what I mean? You just couldn't do it. You'd
Right.
have to do it in months in advance. But he could get away with it, and even how he got there, he really flew the coup. He got in a fight with Priscilla and Vernon, and he just left with no money. He obviously never carried a wallet because he didn't have to. He just said things and they were done. But he left alone. He shows up at the airport, and of course, the lady at at the counter is like, "This is Elvis," because you couldn't copy that if it was Elvis. And there were no Elvis impersonators in those days, so it was the '70s. And he says, "I want a ticket to LA. I got to go see a friend and get some money." And he's like, "Well, you want to pay?" He's like, "I don't have any money." He's like, "Well, I'll bill Graceland. You're good for it." And then she says, "Do you have any weapons?" And of course, he opens it. He was always packing heat. He had guns all over him because his life was always threatened. He was always in danger. There were death threats and kidnapping threats and all that. And that's why he was into karate, self-defense. But the security come. Yeah, this is pre 9/11, but it doesn't matter. They take him to the back, and they're like, Elvis, it's against federal laws to carry guns on a plane. And he's like, come on, guys, I need these. So they're like, all right, if you give us an autograph and don't show your guns on the plane, you can go. Nobody would do that today. Or there's the other story where somebody had stolen some diamonds or money from him, and he was in Vegas. He was really pissed off. So he gets with his bodyguards and they drive to the hotel. You can almost hear the banjo music, like they drive to the Vegas airport, and he's like, all right, everybody spread out. Let's find this guy. And Elvis, of course, part of the posse. And somebody says the guy's on the airplane, but it's taxiing in the runway. And Elvis is like, so Elvis runs out of the gate in the middle of the tarmac and, takes out one of his badges or whatever. And the pilot's like, Elvis Presley is stopping my plane. So what does he do? He lets Elvis on the plane. And Elvis is looking around and he's asking for the guy. And the guy never got on the plane. And he's like, sorry, guys. And he gets off the plane and later finds the guy. But imagine today, no star or influencer could do that. If you stopped a plane on the runway, you're going to go to jail or be crucified by the press. But only Elvis could get away with these very crazy, eccentric moves.
Yeah, no, I like that little scene in Nixon Elvis where they're like taking out all his guns and they're walking up the stairs and he's like, they didn't find this one. And he still has like a little one on.
He's going to see Hoover and he's still armed. And he saw Nixon. Yeah, he was also with Nixon and he still had his guns. See, they didn't get all of them. So only person who'd ever gone into the Oval Office with a weapon that wasn't Secret Service.
Right. Yeah. And like you said, today, if that happens, we wouldn't just have one picture. We'd know everything that was said, there'd be selfies.
And they would charge that person. I don't care if you're Mr. Beast or Taylor Swift, you would be charged.
Well, I guess final question before we wrap up tonight. Scientology comes up later with Priscilla and them. How did that conflict with Elvis's beliefs, and was there tension with that while they were together?
No. Yeah, Priscilla unfortunately did join Scientology after he died, and so did Lisa Marie. Riley Keough did too, his granddaughter, who now controls the empire. They've all left since, I believe, but in the late 60s, early 70s, Scientology was just making inroads in LA and it was doing really well. It was spreading like wildfire. But Elvis, he hated them. He never, because he called them a godless religion. He saw all religions as equal and valuable, and to each his own. That was his mantra. But he thought this religion has no divine source. So he hated the fact they were always asking him for money. He said that he avoided them. A friend said he avoided them like cobras. He just did not like them. And that was it. He just avoided them.
Yeah, no, very, very interesting stuff. And hey, if people want to learn more interesting stuff about Elvis, where can they do that with your book and as well as you got a podcast?
Yeah, they can just go to my website, my name, Miguel Connor, all lowercase.com. And it's a simple site. You'll find information about the Elvis book, my podcast on culture called Gen X Wasteland, but also there's information on my voiceover services, my social media, my Gnostic podcast, AM by Gnostic Radio, and everything there. So you can take whatever road you want. Of course, there's information about how to get the book. The book is available everywhere, both in physical, ebook, or even audiobook.
Very cool. Yeah, no, I'll make sure to put links in the description below. So if you guys want, you guys can go there. But Miguel, this has been awesome. We'll have to do it again, especially when you got the Bowie one out, because I've always been really big into Bowie. So let us know. I would definitely love to have you back on.
Yeah, you'll be surprised. I've shown it to some allegedly big Bowie fanatics, and they were really surprised at what I found about him. But yeah, he's also very demanding. So still working on that one.
Yeah. No, this is great. And thank you again for joining. We'll have to do it again.
Yeah, thank you.
Enjoyed it too.
So once again, Sam and I want to say thank you to Miguel for joining us on this awesome episode of Culz Interviews. Make sure to go down in the description below and check out those links if you want to find out more about his work and, of course, his book, The Occult Elvis. But until next time, guys, for more Culz interviews, click that link to your left. For more about what we're doing here at Culz Paranormal, click that link to your right. And don't forget to hit that like and give us a subscribe. And let us know, what did you learn from this interview? Tell us in the comments below.